Hi, welcome to Lower Back Rescue. Lower back's an area that can get really, really tight. And I know for quite a lot of you, it's a place where you experience discomfort or tightness around the lower back, around the hips. So this is a specific class to loosen up that area. Hopefully it'll feel really helpful. So when we're working with the lower back, we also end up looking a little bit at the core. So this will do both. So we work front and back of the body. So it'll be a lower back and core sort of strengthener today, and opener. So a couple of blocks would be really helpful, and definitely a couple of cushions. You may want a blanket for underneath the knees as well, or underneath your head if you like to have that when you're lying down. So we're going to come to start lying down. You want to grab a couple of cushions to start with, and maybe a blanket if you like to have one underneath your head. So lying down onto your back, and when you get there, bringing the soles of the feet together and allowing the knees to open up to the side. So this is where your cushions will be really helpful. Coming into Supta Baddha Konasana. So if you're feeling quite tight on the inner thighs, what you might want to do is either grab a couple of pillows on each side or kind of smoosh them up so that you've got the support. So really popping the cushions underneath your thighs so that you're not having to grip with your hip flexors, so that they're able to relax and open up. So getting yourself nice and supported. And then allowing your eyes to close, maybe bringing hands to belly, and starting off class in this opening pose. So allowing your breath to travel deeper into the body. If there's anywhere where you can still feel hanging on in the front of the hip flexors, is there any space to let go? If you need extra support in there, grabbing extra support. And getting a sense of the knees falling away from each other and down into the earth. And while you're in this position, also seeing if you can find maybe a bit of connection with the lower back on the ground as well. So perhaps as you exhale, you notice the breath drawing out of the body, you notice everything drawing in, and as you inhale, maybe there's space to fill the body and notice the lower back expanding across the ground. So taking a few more breaths here in this pose. When we're working on the lower back, it's really important if you're in this kind of position lying down on your back to see if you can find a bit of connection with the ground, with your lower back. And then as we're opening up into the hips here, the hips and the lower back are really connected. So often when the lower back is in discomfort, it's actually tension held in the hips. So you'll notice today that there's a fair amount of opening in the hips, because that will help to loosen up the lower back as well. So the hips, the lower back, the abs, all of these groups of muscles work together. And so that's why we work together when we're loosening up the lower back on all of these areas. On your next inhale, we're going to hand underneath each knee as you open your eyes and drawing the knees to center. You can move your cushions out of the way, and if you want to, you can take a little windscreen wiper from side to side just to let go of any holding that might be in the hip flexors, any tightness. And then finding your way back to center, we're going to come into a figure 4 position on your back. So feet are hips width apart, and then drawing the right knee into the chest, Opening out the right knee so that the right ankle comes to rest on the left thigh. Now, if your hips are quite tight, this might already feel like a fairly big opener, so by all means stay here. And again, trying to find that sense of connection with the lower back on the ground. You might find that you're okay to lift the left foot, and maybe you're holding either behind the thigh or behind the shin. So wherever you're holding, seeing if you can still keep the lower back connected with the ground. So not lifting the sort of the pelvis off the ground to bring the legs closer to you. So seeing if the lower back and the hips can stay really firmly connected with the ground. Still getting a sense of openness across the chest. The head stays on the ground. The shoulders are as open as possible. So it may be that if you've grabbed hold of your shin, you want to move to holding onto your thigh, just to experience that openness in your body. And then from here, you can close your eyes again if you want, breathing into that right hip. If you need a more intense opening at any point, you can draw the foot further down towards the hip. But what you're really trying to do is keep that knee open as much as you can and keep the rest of the body open as well. So this shouldn't feel like a pose where you're forcing or where you're really having to grip really tightly to hold on. So finding something where the body can feel comfortable. Yoga is not about torture, so being really mindful of that. And if your hips do feel tight here, just taking whichever variation feels good. It's actually better to back out a bit if that's what your body needs. It will benefit so much more. And then on your next inhale, bringing that left foot down to the ground if it's been lifted, and then using your hand to gently guide that right leg back to center, back to the ground. And again, you can take a little windscreen wiper, maybe a couple of times side to side, or if you're ready to go straight onto the other side, then this time it will be the left foot which comes across, so left ankle onto the right thigh. And then finding your place here. So this side might be a bit tighter. Feel free to leave that foot on the floor if you want. So this is a really nice position. You can use your hands to help open the knee. You can hang out here for a little bit. Or if you want to lift that right foot, then you can lift the right foot and hold on either behind the thigh. So maybe grabbing the thigh first. How does that feel? Taking a moment to settle in. And if you're not sort of feeling the openness there, if you need a little bit more, then of course you can grab hold of your shin instead. So that does increase the stretch quite a lot, especially if you're keeping the rest of the body grounded, you're not lifting up on the pelvis, not lifting the head. So that does make the stretch quite a lot more intense. So being really mindful here, backing out or moving in further as feels good for you. So if your lower back's been super tight, you might find this feels really, really intense. It can feel like a very intense stretch. I'm certainly feeling it a lot in my left hip at the moment. So yeah, if you're wondering why your hip's feeling so tight, it's all part and parcel of the lower back feeling tight as well. So sending your breath down to any areas where there's tightness in that left hip. Seeing if you can visualize a little bit of space being created there. Maybe you can find a little bit of looseness or relaxation within that left hip. Let go of any holding that's going on. And taking one more breath here, really breathing into that left hip and any other areas where you're feeling this stretch. When you're ready, if your right foot's lifted, you can lower the right foot down and then gently guide your left leg back to centre, taking those windscreen wipes if that feels good, or staying in centre if you prefer. The next thing we're going to do is grab a block if you have one. So if you haven't got a block, then don't worry too much. But if you have one, then do grab it. And we're going to start off by bringing the block in between the knees and holding on. So you might find that you've got something else you can replace with your block here. If not, just imagining that you are holding something, not super, super tightly, but just getting a feeling of engagement through the legs. And then from here, bringing the hands down by your sides, lifting the knees up, lifting the feet up. So coming up to a kind of right angle position. And then from here, we're going to work on strengthening the core. So starting off, seeing if you can really engage the lower back down into the floor. So find a connection with the lower back like we did at the beginning. So often when we start doing exercises with the core, the lower back likes to peel up and lift. So you may even like to pop your hands underneath there just to kind of see if you're really pressing down into your hands if your lower back's connected. And then beginning to move the feet down and forward and taking small movements at first, seeing if as you do that, if your lower back can still stay connected with the floor. So if you want to, you can begin to take the feet down lower. You can take them down so they hover an inch or two off the floor. But if you're doing that, really checking that the lower back's still connected. Sometimes the more we work the abs, the more the lower back peels up and lifts. So if you notice that as you take the feet down lower, the lower back begins to peel up, then come back to these small pulses instead. So even these little pulses do really good work for the lower back and for the core. If for any reason these small pulses are not feeling good, then by all means you can bring a leg down and you can work doing pulses with one leg instead to start with. So that is absolutely an option if for any reason you're feeling really uncomfortable with both legs up. Okay, and then just make sure you're doing an equal number on both sides, obviously. But otherwise, seeing if you can have that block in there and then checking in as you lower the feet down. If you want to make this harder, you can bring, if you want to say harder, if you want to have more engagement with the core, then you can bring the arms out to the sides. Now, I would only suggest this if you're absolutely confident that your lower back's really staying on the ground. If your lower back's starting to peel up as you're bringing the feet down, then actually bringing the arms out is not going to benefit either your core or your lower back at all. So really listening into that. Take the small movements first and then see what your body's feeling. If the small movements feel good, stay with the small movements. So because obviously I'm pregnant at the moment, I'm going to stay with very small movements and I am going to keep my hands down by my sides. But if you want to bring the arms out to the sides, you can. But whatever you're doing, keeping that lower back engagement with the ground and then focusing on engaging your core as the legs move away. So I'm going to leave you to take a few more of those with the double leg. I'm going to do some single leg for a little while. So if you are doing the single leg, you can follow me with timing. Otherwise, using your breath on your double legs. And again, you can take the foot down so it's almost hovering off the floor an inch or two. You can take really small pulses. You can have the arms out to the side, but just really checking in if you're taking your arms out to the side that it is the core doing the work, not your lower back. So that's really important to make sure. Now we'll go for another few breaths here, so don't worry if it's beginning to feel a little tired on your core. You can move back to smaller movements if you've been doing the bigger movements. Or you can move on to single leg if that feels better. And then when you're ready, removing the block, bringing both feet down. And if you want to, you can take that little windscreen wiper. So that's a really nice simple core engagement exercise. And because you can check that your lower back's on the ground, you can make sure that you're not overusing your lower back. Often in things like sit-ups, you know, we might use our neck a lot when we do things like that. And with a lot of other core things, we use our lower back instead. All it does is it makes either our lower back or our neck really tight rather than actually engaging and doing anything with the core. And having a strong core will certainly help any lower back pain that you're experiencing. Okay, when you're ready, coming over onto one side and up to seat. And then we're going to come into a kneeling position, tucking the toes underneath. So you can pop a blanket underneath the knees here if you want. And then coming slowly back to sit on the heels. So this stretches out the fascia and the muscles in the bottom of the feet. It can feel really intense. If you're doing this right now and you're thinking, oh my God, this is too much, sit with it if you can. If it gets too much at any point, of course you can bring hands forward or you can untuck the toes for a little bit. So the reason why we're stretching out the back of the feet is because the fascia and the muscles in the back of the feet actually run all the way out the back of the legs and to the spine. So if your lower back's tight, then you can always guarantee that your feet are going to be tight as well, and vice versa. So this is a really good way to work with the body as a whole to loosen up the lower back. So it's a nice little trick if you know that you've got a sore lower back. So like I was saying earlier today, it's all of these bits of the body working together, which is why we kind of do the core exercises. We open up the feet, we open up the hips. So lots of different things going on. So seeing if you can stay with that for a couple more breaths. I know it's super intense. Staying with your breath, seeing if you can avoid holding the breath. It can be really tempting to do that when it's uncomfortable. Maybe on your next inhale, deep inhale through the nose, sigh out through the mouth. And then hands in front of the feet. Oh, untucking those toes. Maybe giving the feet a little shake on the floor. A little release. Okay, and then shifting back. Hands underneath the shoulders, tucking the toes under. We'll take a little downward facing dog. So you can keep the knees nice and bent here. Pressing up with the fingers, hips come high. And then on your inhale, right foot coming forward in between the hands. So you can use your hand to help it get there, but that's what we're kind of aiming for, is to take that lunge, lowering the back knee down. So lowering the left knee down, untucking the toes, and then bringing the hands down to the ground. And then from here, you can either have the left hand onto the block or onto a ground. So if you have a block, you've got an extra little bit of support here. And then using your right hand to open up the right knee to the side. So again, working into the hip, taking a little twist. And inhaling back to center. If you've got your two blocks, you might want to have these here lengthways. It helps to keep the body taller. And then inhale, opening up through the chest if you can. Gaze comes upwards. So if you haven't got the blocks, you'll be bringing hands to thighs to do this. So the blocks is just an extra bit of stability. And then bending that back knee, drawing the knee towards, the foot towards the hips. And drawing the head and the chest back. So getting this feeling of the foot coming to the midline and the head and the chest drawing to the midline as well. If you imagine there's a line coming down the middle in that space. And then exhale, coming back. So really opening up the front of the body there. Bringing hands either side of the foot, coming back into an all fours. You can step back into downward dog if you prefer. We're going to come into low lunge on the other side. So if you're in downward dog, you'll be taking that big lunge forward. Otherwise, bringing the left foot forward. And then option to have that block underneath your right hand as you bring your left hand onto the left knee, opening up into a little twist here. And then coming back to center. If you've got your 2 blocks, you're bringing them both lengthways up. Otherwise, you can bring your hands onto your thigh. As you inhale, opening up through the chest, gaze comes up, and then bending that knee, foot comes towards the hip. And then exhale, coming back down. And then coming back into an all-fours position, bringing that left foot back. We'll finish by taking a couple of cat and cows. So hands underneath the shoulders, knees underneath the hips. As you inhale, pressing through the hands, hips rise, drawing the chest through the arms. And then exhale, tucking the chin, rounding the spine. Once more into your cow. Inhaling, opening, expanding. Exhale, rolling through the spine, 1 vertebrae at a time as you come into cat. And then bringing the big toes together. You can have either the knees apart or the knees together. So knees apart, the chest will kind of sink down more into the ground. If you bring the knees together, you'll get more of a rounding through the spine. So whatever you feel that you need today. You can pop a cushion in between thighs and calves. And you can also pop something under your head if you want. Coming down into child's pose. And this is where we'll finish today. So taking a few deep breaths in child's pose. If you've decided to keep the knees together, you may choose to have the arms down by your sides instead of out in front. So kind of coming up into a little fetal position. And maybe taking a moment to check in with your body. How did that feel today? Were there areas that you were maybe surprised that were tight? Were there exercises or stretches that felt particularly good? Poses that felt particularly good? So seeing what worked best for your body today. Sending your breath to the back of your body, to your lower back as you inhale, to your hips. Exhaling, releasing any remaining tension in that part of the body. Taking a few moments in stillness here. Please feel free to stay in this position for as long as feels good. You can come back to any of those poses or stretches that felt particularly helpful. I look forward to seeing you in other classes again soon. And I hope that's helped loosen up any tight lower backs, engage a little bit of your core, release some tension in the hips. Namaste.